Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Process. How often do we sit and think about how far it is that we've come? How often do we allow ourselves to really celebrate the growth that we've made, the change that we've implemented, the things that we have let go that were not serving us anymore? Not very often. Most of us continue to move the goalpost every single time we achieve something so that it never feels like we're actually achieving something. But when we think about it, where you are right now is probably a place that 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago version of you would be blown away by. Even if your current reality is not exactly what you want, for sure there are elements that you could not have even potentially fathomed that you would have in previous parts of your life. But we don't really take a lot of time to talk about it or to sit in it or to celebrate it. And what I want to do today is share a little bit more around why I think it is so incredibly important to do this work. And by this work, I mean figuring out who you are, what you want, what you stand for, what you don't stand for, what you feel like your purpose or calling is in this life, and then going for it and making it happen and trusting that it probably won't turn out as you currently see it right now, but trusting that somewhere in the future, it will become something even better than maybe what you're thinking right now. And in order to do that, I want to paint a picture of where I was 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, not even that long ago, but it feels like a different lifetime. So 4 years ago, I was working in a job that I really was not enjoying. I liked it at the beginning, and then things started to go south when they changed over the leadership. And I have spoken about this before, I'm pretty sure, on this podcast, but essentially, I started feeling incredibly depleted from this job. But I felt like I had to stay. I felt like I needed to be in this job because I needed the money. Our expenses were going up. We were looking at saving for a house. We are starting to feel a little bit more established in who we were. This is right around the time when we got married. And so things were shifting for us. We felt like we needed to embody this version that society kind of puts out there to say, hey, look, this is what we're doing now. You've got the degree. And so now you've got to back up that degree with a job. And whatever job you get into, you should probably stick that out for a while because now you're making good money and you need that money to fund your lifestyle. I was in this job feeling so exhausted, so depleted, and really invalidated a lot of the time because I was putting forth my ideas and I was trying to speak up and say things that I thought were unjust, and nothing was happening. It was falling on deaf ears. But all of this to say, there was no part of me that really felt like I could leave. There was no part of me that felt like there was another option for me. So what this looked like was really long days where I would wake up, snooze my alarm a couple of times, then be rushed in the morning and be kind of dreading the day ahead, not really wanting to go to work, but knowing that I had to, hoping that it would go really fast, that I'd be really busy, I wouldn't have much time to think, and that I would just get through all my tasks, and then it would be over, and I'd be able to go home and rest. Then I would work my full day. It would be crazy busy. It would be overwhelming. I wouldn't have much time to think, which doesn't sound very great objectively. But in that position, it felt like a protective almost mechanism because it meant that I didn't have to think about how unhappy I was. I would do that. I would come home, put some sort of dinner together, so exhausted, and then basically collapse on the couch for the rest of the night, watching TV, sort of talking to my husband. But a lot of the time we were so tired that I don't think we really spent that much time talking. We were just sitting and watching TV. Then at some point we would be tired enough to turn off the TV and go to bed. And in between all of that, of course, we took our dog for walks and we would go do things here and there. But I was so exhausted from my job that I had very little energy to go out and do things, especially on weekdays. I would never do anything on a weekday because I had no energy for it. And I would be hanging out for the weekend, wishing my days away, hoping that by the time I got to the weekend, then I would have the energy to be able to do all the things I wanted and really make the most of my life. But as you can probably relate to this as well, the weekend would come and my energy wouldn't suddenly come with it. I would need one day to recuperate from the craziness of the week. And then it's already Sunday. It's already the day that you need to start prepping for the week ahead, where you start feeling that anxiety coming up and that resentment and that overwhelm and that worry about what's going to come in this week ahead. That was the constant pattern that I was in. So Saturday would sometimes be a nice day, but a lot of times we would just be vegging out because we were so tired. And then Sunday we might try to do things, but we also had to get ready for the week. We had to do the shopping. We had to do the cleaning. And then, of course, inevitably, the Sunday scaries would start to settle in. I would start to feel really overwhelmed. And the cycle repeated itself over and over. But at this period of my life, like I mentioned earlier, it didn't feel like I had another option. I needed the money. I had to prioritize that. But what I didn't realize at the time was that that was coming at the expense of everything else. So my physical health started to go down. My mental health was definitely going down because I was in a workplace where they didn't actually respect my ideas. Even when I would try to voice them, they were shut down, which obviously reinforced the idea that my ideas weren't worth sharing. And if you have listened to previous episodes, you would know that that is a huge limiting belief that I have been working through, because I was constantly feeling like my ideas weren't good. So then in this situation, when I would put forth an idea, it would get shut down. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I shouldn't say anything then, and I should just be quiet and hope my days go by fast. But looking back now, I can see how sad it is to live a life where you are constantly wishing time away every week, waiting for Friday, only to have 48 hours, and not even all of those 48 hours get to be enjoyed because you're either decompressing from the week or you're recompressing for the week ahead. That is not a way to live, but it was the way that I was living. It was for a long time. And it wasn't until I went on holiday and went over to Canada that I got some distance from this job. When I had distance, it became abundantly clear to me that I had my priorities in the complete wrong order, and that the stress from this job was causing such a ripple effect in every other domain of my life. I was so drained. I was struggling with my gut. I thought I had these allergies and sensitivities, when in reality, it was a lot of stress from my job. And when I think about why I stayed in this position and why I felt like I had no other choice, for me, it really comes back to this conditioning that I've had since I was a young person, that this is the path. You go to school, you get good grades, you get into university, you do the degree, then you get the job, you get the mortgage and the husband, wife, then you have kids, then you stay in that job while you have kids, and you eventually move your way up the ladder, and then you retire, and then you can enjoy the last couple of decades of your life. That's a pretty common story, and that's a pretty common trajectory, and that's what I saw modeled for me in my parents, in my aunties and uncles, in my grandparents. Everyone kind of went through that. And if they had some sort of passion, it generally wasn't what they were doing at work. Sometimes it was, for sure, but a lot of the times it wasn't. And because they were so tired from their job and from life and from admin and from kids, there was no time to pursue passions. Maybe occasionally, but not really. Not until they were much later in life, when they're now looking back and going, damn, I really wish I had spent a little bit more time working on this hobby that I loved, or I wish that I had taken lessons in this. And now I can see that even 4 years ago, I was stuck in that same loop. And that's the trajectory that I was on because I was following what everyone else was doing. And that's pretty normal, I think, because not a lot of people are talking about there being another option. Even when you think about business owners or a lot of times just anything to do with work, we tend to think of work over here and then play and fun and joy and happiness over here, because you don't want to do what you love for work because then you might not love it anymore. I've heard that story many times. I've been told that many times, not to do what you love for work. But I think what has happened in that story becoming so prevalent is that we've forgotten what it feels like to be so aligned in what it is that we're doing for work, that it almost feels like it's normal, like it's expected to not like your job or to feel burnt out by it, at least a little bit. You know, it's almost like, oh yeah, that's part of the game, is to be burnt out by what I'm doing. But when we think about our lives and when we think about the different windows that we have in our lives, this window that I was in of newly married, or I think I was just about to be married at that point, no kids, didn't have a mortgage yet. I was still very young. I was 26 or 27. And so, in the grand scheme of things, I was at this part in my life where arguably we should be having lots of fun and we should be figuring things out and trying things and getting it wrong and experimenting and just letting ourselves be. But because of this story that I felt was so true for me, that I needed to have it all figured out and I needed to be on the path, the thought of quitting my job was just, it was unreal. There was no real way that I could, unless I found a job that was just as good, if not better, that was going to pay me better. And again, that's coming back to money, right? That's putting money at the center of everything. And I think this is where a lot of us get it so wrong, is that we think that we need to have a certain amount of money and that we have to basically sacrifice everything else in pursuit of it. When in reality, what is a life if you are so miserable with the money that you can't even really spend it, or you're waiting for your 4 weeks of annual leave each year to actually enjoy your life? What? How is this the way that we are moving through the world now? It's wild. So, this is how I was for a long time. And in that job, it became so clear to me, especially when I went away on holiday, that I couldn't keep doing this. I could, but where was that going to take me? And what was that going to look like in the long term? So, what I ended up doing was, as soon as I realized that this was happening, I actually quit my job while I was over there. I got a new job while I was over there as well. I did a bunch of different interviews. And then I also decided, you know what? I don't want to live in the place that we're living anymore because it's sucking the life out of me. So we're going to move. And so we broke our lease. We found a place to live. And then when we got home, we moved to a new location within 10 days. And then I think a week after that, I started my new job. And I thought at this point, you know what? I've done it. I got myself out of that situation and now I feel really good and now everything's going to be great. Joke's on me because I clearly hadn't learned the lesson yet. This next job was better. It was better in certain areas, but I was still stuck doing something that I didn't love. I didn't realize that that was actually the crux of it. So even though I moved into a different position in a different company, the same thing started coming up for me because I wasn't feeling fulfilled in what it was that I was doing. There was so much in the space of speech pathology in Australia that was really draining me. And then I started getting sick. I had my chronic lip issue, which I believe I have spoken about in another episode as well, which I dealt with for 12 months. 12 months, I had this chronic issue all over my mouth. Very painful, very embarrassing because I couldn't hide it. I had to stop wearing makeup. I had to stop putting any sort of product on my skin. And that was really hard. And when I look back on that period of my life, which was 2023, I was equally, if not even more, unhappy. Even though I felt like I was moving in the right direction by changing jobs and moving to a new location, I still felt so trapped by needing to prioritize money over everything else. I chose this job because it was good pay. I chose this job because it was more secure. And I thought that I was doing the right thing. But clearly, my body was sending me signals that this was not right for me. And it was still at the expense of my relationships and my mental health and my physical health and even my relationship with my husband, because he was really struggling too. He was also in a job that he hated. And both of us were just living in this constant cycle of just make it to the weekend, just make it to the weekend, just make it to the weekend. Every single week. It was brutal. And I know a lot of people listening to this, are going to be able to resonate with this, because I have spoken to so many people that are in this exact same situation. And almost every single one of my clients is in this exact same situation as well. It is not a unique experience, which honestly scares the shit out of me. How is it that so many of us in our late 20s, early 30s, and beyond are feeling like we have to stay in this situation that we're in because we need the money, but not realizing how much that is really costing us? Not realizing that the cost of that decision to stay in the job for the money is widespread across every single element of your life. And that at some point, it might be this year, it might be 2 years from now, it might be a decade or 2 decades from now, you will realize it, and you will look back on whatever length of time that you were stuck in that situation and go, oh my God, what was I doing? And you're going to wish that you could shake that version of you and say, wake up. This life is so short. It is so short. What are we doing? Now, I can acknowledge the fact that money does have a purpose. Of course, I'm not saying to quit your job and go live like a hippie and not have any money. Of course, I understand that we need money to survive. But staying in a job or a position that is draining the life out of you for the money, in my opinion, is not worth it on any level. On any level, it is not worth it. Because at some point, when you do get out of that situation, you're going to look back on that time and be so sad and disappointed and disheartened and heartbroken for yourself. Look at what you gave up. For what? A better lifestyle, potentially? Maybe. Obviously, we need some element of money to get by. Yes. But you could work doing anything. You could work at a cafe. You could work at Bunnings if you're in Australia, or Home Depot if you're in North America. You could work as an assistant for someone in an industry that really interests you. And sure, you might get a bit of a pay cut. Maybe you have to work 2 jobs for a little bit. Maybe you have to switch things up. But what would it be like if you could do something that actually brought you joy, or didn't bring you an insurmountable amount of stress, where you have no energy for anything else? That to me is a cost that I'm not willing to pay, that I did pay for several years when I look back, but that when I learned the lesson in 2024, 2023, 2024 is when I really was like, oh, this is not it. I will never go back to that. And we have made decisions in order to allow both my husband and myself to be able to pursue things that are more in alignment. And that part of that has been reducing our lifestyle and going, look, what do we actually need to be able to survive and still have, fun with what we're doing? But to not get sucked into all the lifestyle creep, as they call it. But also just to realize that there are so many different priorities, and that there are so many options out there for how you can do things. And when you lean into what you really feel called to do and what you really love, opportunities will present themselves. And the expansiveness that comes with that and the possibilities that come with that far, far outweigh any sort of container that I could put myself in. I won't do it again. But I had to go through that to get to where I'm at now. And in the middle of all of that came a lot of self-reflection, a lot of getting very honest and a little bit brutal with myself at times, because it feels easier to stay in those shitty jobs because they're familiar. Your brain knows what to expect, even though it sucks. It knows what to expect. And so for that reason, it would prefer for you to stay in that situation. And so when I started moving myself away from this and started giving myself other opportunities, I started coaching with Terry Condon, who is a coach in the money financial space. And relationships. I started working with him. And then I started doing some copywriting. And then I started looking at my own kind of coaching. What could that look like? And then, of course, I went away and had a baby. And that gave me a whole new set of, a whole new perspective on life. But all of this had to happen where I had to get really real with myself on what am I willing to pay? Not with my money, but with my life. What am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to let go of? And for me, this sense of joy and this sense of presence in my life that I started to accumulate from doing this work, it became more and more clear to me that I was not willing to sacrifice that for any amount of money, for any sort of job where I felt like I was not valued, I was not getting pushed, I was not getting fulfilled by the work that I was doing. No more. And so where that led me was to start this speech therapy business so that I could learn about what it means to have a business and get to do this speech therapy work in my own way. I get to set the rules. I get to set the expectations, the standards. I get to choose who I work with. I get to choose how I work, when I work, what that looks like for me. And that gave me such an overwhelming sense of joy. And I think that it's so important to talk about this because being a speech therapist is not my lifelong calling. I like the work a lot. I love the children that I work with. I love the families that I work with. I love the work that I get to do with them. I wouldn't say that it's fully aligned with my purpose, but it has granted me so much of an opportunity to grow and to learn and to let go of these old beliefs that I have to do things in a certain way, that I have to stick in a job that I don't like, that there's only one option for me to be successful, and that my definition of success has been based off of all of these other people that I don't actually resonate with. Because to me, success is not being in a place of wishing my days away, hoping for the weekend, feeling so depleted, so stressed out all the time, and really not even being able to enjoy my life. That to me, no matter what amount of money I'm making, is not success. And so I had to redefine it. I had to figure out, well, what does that actually look like for me? And the conclusion that I came to was having this beautiful little speech therapy business that is allowing me to support my family, but then also start to experiment and explore and get really creative with this other side of me in this coaching space, to start this podcast and to practice articulating myself, sharing my ideas, sharing my story, and being okay with it not being a massive success overnight. Because I do feel like another element of this for me is that this old story of needing to do things a certain way also came with a lot of praise for doing things the right way. Because as you know, if you've listened to previous episodes, one of my core beliefs about myself was that I am naturally good at what I do. And if I'm not naturally good at it, I will not do it. I will avoid it like the plague. If it is something that does not come naturally to me, you will not see me engaging, or you would not. Let me rephrase that because that's no longer my core belief, but it was. You would not see me doing something that I could not almost instantly get praise for being good at. And so, what I'm saying here now is that as I am exploring this creative side of myself, I am giving myself opportunities to go, look, you don't actually need all of that praise or that validation from other people when you feel it in yourself. When you know internally that what you're doing is in alignment with your soul's purpose, none of that outside noise stands a chance. It doesn't matter because this is why I'm here and this is what I feel called to do. And honestly, that might change in the future. But I'm at a point now where I can confidently step into owning this version of me and owning this part of my story. And the fact that it took all of those pieces to get to where I'm at now, challenging those beliefs and sitting with myself and going, look, if you're unhappy, how long are you going to just let that be the case? Because you can leave. You've done it before. And now you're in another job that you don't like. So why don't you just do it again? What's stopping you? What's holding you back? And it's that belief that I had that I needed to have it figured out. So the more that I go through this and the more that I challenge myself, the more that I am finding, oh, okay, it's all right to not have it figured out. It's all right to have this idea evolve over time and to trust that it will take me in whatever direction I'm meant to go, because I will continue to look for and seek out these opportunities to challenge myself and to step into these uncomfortable positions and to recognize when something isn't serving me anymore and say enough and move on. And that has gotten me to here, and I'm sure that it will continue to take me further. And I'm sure that in 2 years' time, I'll be looking back on this version of me, and I will have so many more lessons to share. But I wanted to share that today because, like I said, so many of us are in this situation where we feel incredibly stuck. We feel so uninspired with what we're doing, and it feels like there's no way out. But let me tell you from the other side or from the middle that there absolutely is another way, and that it can look like whatever you want it to look like. But the very first step is learning how to trust that voice inside of you and also to take action, to make a decision, to stand up for yourself, to use your voice, to quit the job, to start a hobby or start an Instagram account, start a podcast, start whatever it is that you have that little niggling in the back of your mind that you would love to do it. That's where it starts. By allowing yourself to have the thought, to follow through on that desire, to take action, to allow it to be messy, and know that the more that you do that, the more that you're going to learn to trust yourself so that you can create a life where you are excited to do whatever you get to do every single day. It might not be perfect. There's going to be ebbs and flows. Absolutely. I'm going through all these new challenges now that I've figured out that level of challenge. I'm on a whole new level of challenge now with having 2 businesses, figuring out what that looks like for me, figuring out how I manage being present in my businesses, pushing them forward, but then also being present for my daughter. How am I telling my story? How am I showing up and demonstrating that journey? Hello, here's a rep right now of me doing this imperfectly. That is why I'm here. And this is what I'm hoping to pass on to you, is this understanding that it takes time and it takes repetition, but the life that you're living right now doesn't have to be your life forever. And if you are in your late 20s, early 30s, or 40s, and you're feeling the call to switch things up, if you're tired of this draining feeling in your body every time you think about going to work, let this be the moment where you open up to yourself and listen to that voice and let it guide you. Let it guide you to wherever that takes you and whatever that looks like. And it's going to be messy as hell. And you're going to get pulled back into your old habits. But you can do this. You can absolutely do this. And if you want more help, you know where to find me. That is all I have for you guys today. If you got value from this, I would love to hear from you. If you have thoughts, you can reach out to me at Hey Brooke Dawson on Instagram. You can also comment on this YouTube video. I would also love it if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. That really helps us to be able to reach more people with this podcast. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. You are all amazing. I hope you have an incredible rest of your day, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.